Let me tell you something the world rarely admits. A woman's solitude is not her weakness. It's her evolution. In the language of emotional intelligence, independence, and self-awareness, the woman who lives alone is rewriting centuries of conditioning. For generations, women were taught that fulfillment begins when someone chooses them, that their value is measured in who stands beside them, not who they become when they stand alone. But something is changing, quietly, powerfully, irreversibly, because the modern woman who lives alone isn't avoiding love, she's redefining it. Her apartment isn't an escape from relationships, it's a sanctuary for self-respect. Her silence isn't loneliness, it's self-mastery. She has learned that peace is louder than attention, and that self-trust is the highest form of intimacy. When she wakes up in her own space, drinks coffee without hurry, moves through the day without performing for anyone's approval, that is not isolation. That is sovereignty. And it unsettles people, because a woman who no longer needs saving cannot be controlled. She has become her own protector, her own witness, her own home. This video will take you beneath the surface, into the hidden psychology of women who live alone. Why they choose solitude over chaos, why they stop chasing love that costs them peace, and why, in learning to be whole by themselves, they become magnetic to everything real. Because self-empowerment isn't found in rebellion, it's found in remembering your worth. Pause for a second. What does freedom mean to you? Comment one word below, freedom, and tell, would you sacrifice your freedom for one person? There's a quiet kind of rebellion in the woman who chooses to live alone. Not the loud, fiery kind that burns bridges, but the slow, steady kind that redefines what it means to belong. Because when a woman decides to live for herself, she's not escaping the world. She's finally entering it on her own terms. She's no longer asking, who will love me? But what do I love? No longer trying to be chosen, she's learning to choose. That shift, subtle but seismic, is the foundation of self-empowerment. It starts with unlearning. For centuries, women were told that solitude was a sentence, a space reserved for those unworthy of affection or too difficult to love. But the truth is, solitude is not exile, it's initiation. The woman who lives alone learns to sit with silence until it speaks. She learns to cook for one and realize that nourishment isn't about numbers. She decorates her home not for guests, but for her soul. She reads books out loud just to hear her own voice again. And in that echo, something sacred returns: self-trust. The world often misunderstands this woman. They call her detached, intimidating, maybe even cold. But that's what happens when a woman no longer performs softness for validation. Her peace threatens those still addicted to chaos. Her stillness becomes a mirror that exposes everyone else's noise. Let's talk about the psychology behind it. When a woman lives alone, her nervous system recalibrates. She's not constantly scanning for danger or approval. Her cortisol lowers, her intuition sharpens. She begins to differentiate between loneliness and liberation, between needing company and choosing connection. This is what psychologists call secure individuation, the ability to find identity within, not in reflection. And in that process, something miraculous happens. She stops betraying herself to be accepted. She no longer texts back out of obligation. She no longer stays just because leaving might make someone else uncomfortable. She no longer apologizes for her boundaries or disguises her intelligence to seem approachable. That's not assertions, that's healing. Because independence is not the absence of love, it's the purification of it. When a woman learns to love herself in silence, she stops settling for attention that feels like noise. She begins to attract people who respect her peace instead of invading it. But let's go deeper. Living alone doesn't mean she doesn't feel pain. It means she finally knows how to hold it. The nights are long sometimes. The bed is wide. The silence echoes with memories of old lovers, old versions of herself, the ghosts of what could have been. But she no longer runs from that ache. She sits with it, because she knows wounds only heal when they're witnessed. There's something profoundly feminine about that strength. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that creates space. A woman who lives alone learns to mother herself, to hold, to soothe, to nurture the parts that were never seen. She becomes both the protector and the protected. And that duality, that divine balance, is what makes her magnetic. Men sense it, friends notice it. She doesn't speak louder, but her presence deepens. People start to listen differently when she talks, not because she demands respect, but because she embodies it. This is what makes such women rare, and to some, intimidating, because in a world that profits from your self-doubt, a woman who knows herself is a threat. She no longer buys love disguised as attention. She no longer chases validation sold as connection. She no longer plays small to keep others competitive. She outgrows what once controlled her. Some call it selfish, but that's the language of those who've never felt what it means to finally be free. You see, empowerment isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the way she locks her door and exhales without needing to explain herself. It's the way she walks home at midnight, not because she wants danger, but because she trusts her own company. It's the way she makes decisions without asking for permission, the way she wears her solitude like silk instead of armor. And maybe that's the part that scares people, that she doesn't need to be rescued. Because we live in a society that's still addicted to the narrative of the saved woman, but the truth is, she saved herself, not through defiance, but through awakening. She realized that her worth was never tied to who stayed or who left. Her worth was always her own reflection, waiting patiently beneath the noise. In psychology, this is called self-actualization, the highest level of human development. It's what happens when you stop chasing approval and start living from authenticity. The woman who reaches this stage doesn't hate love. She just refuses the version of it that costs her peace. When people ask her, "Aren't you lonely?" she smiles softly and says, "Sometimes, but I'm never lost." Because loneliness, she learned, is not the same as emptiness. It's the silence between endings and beginnings, a sacred pause before the next chapter. She spends that pause learning, healing, expanding. She invests in herself the way others invest in relationships. She learns new skills, explores new passions, travels alone, sits in cafes with her own thoughts as her favorite companion. And one day, she notices something has changed. The craving for constant company disappears. The fear of missing out dissolves. Her body relaxes in her own presence, as if whispering, "We made it home." Let's pause here. If this part of the story resonates with you, comment the word strength, because that's what this really is. The strength to stay, to rebuild, to belong to yourself. Now, here's the paradox. When a woman reaches this level of wholeness, love no longer becomes a need, it becomes an addition. She no longer seeks someone to complete her story, but someone who understands its depth. She's not looking for a rescuer, she's looking for a witness. This kind of woman doesn't fall in love quickly. She observes energy, consistency, safety. She notices how people handle her silence, not just her laughter. She doesn't confuse attention with affection, or presence with depth, because she's lived through the kind of emptiness that once wore love's mask, and she swore to herself, never again. Her standards aren't high, they're healed. And healed standards look impossible to those who haven't done the same work. That's why she intimidates, not because she's too much, but because she's too real. She wants the kind of love that doesn't shrink her spirit, that doesn't demand she dim her fire to fit into someone else's comfort zone. And until that love arrives, she walks alone, gracefully, intentionally, unbothered. She has learned that solitude isn't the opposite of love. It's the soil where real love grows. Because when a woman learns to love herself, she becomes magnetic to everything aligned with her peace. And that's the secret. She doesn't chase, she attracts. Not by strategy, but by energy. This woman doesn't need to say much. Her energy speaks first. Her peace introduces her before her words do. Her boundaries filter out what her intuition already knows doesn't belong. And when people leave, she doesn't break anymore. She blesses their exit. Because she understands now, every ending is just another layer of liberation. She's no longer afraid to start over, because she's done it before, and she knows what she's made of. There's power in that kind of knowing. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. When she looks in the mirror now, she doesn't see lack, she sees legacy. A lineage of women who chose silence over performance, truth over comfort, peace over attention. And she realizes she's not just living alone, she's living free. That's the hidden truth about women who walk this path. They're not rejecting love, they're protecting alignment. They're not avoiding commitment, they're rejecting compromise. They're not cold, they're clear. And maybe, just maybe, the world is finally ready to understand that kind of woman. So if you've ever been told you're too independent, too strong, too much, remember this: you're not too much. You're simply too awake for a world still asleep. So right now, if this resonates, take a breath and comment one word below: strength. Because that's what solitude reveals. Not absence, but strength.
There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes no one is coming to save her. And strangely, that realization doesn't break her, it births her. Because the truth about women who live alone isn't that they don't believe in love, it's that they finally believe in themselves enough to stop accepting half of it. Once upon a time, she mistook attention for affection. She mistook being needed for being valued. But now she knows, love isn't proven by presence, it's revealed through peace. She has learned to differentiate between being chosen and being honored, and she would rather walk alone in truth than be accompanied by someone who makes her forget who she is. That's not bitterness, it's wisdom. The kind earned through nights spent staring at ceilings, rewriting her story in the silence. The kind that comes from crying until there are no tears left, and realizing what remains is strength. Because empowerment doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives in small, private moments, like paying your bills alone, fixing what breaks, or watching the sunset with no one to perform happiness for. It's in the way she celebrates small victories no one else sees, the way she creates beauty in spaces others overlook, the way she forgives herself for the versions of her that didn't know better. And that forgiveness, that's where the healing truly begins. She no longer needs to prove her softness by shrinking her strength. She no longer needs to explain her boundaries to those who thrive on crossing them. She's learned that silence can be louder than confrontation, that walking away can be a form of self-respect, and that solitude is not the absence of love, it's the presence of clarity. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's what she did. She faced her patterns. She saw where her own fear disguised itself as loyalty. She noticed how her nurturing turned into self-erasure, and she stopped. Not with rage, but with reverence. Because she finally understood that to love deeply, she must first stand firmly. And that standing alone is not a punishment, it's preparation. Now, when she looks at the world, she doesn't envy relationships that glitter. She reads the energy beneath them. She's not seduced by romance that rushes. She trusts the kind that breathes. Because she knows, the woman who lives alone has already met the hardest person to love, herself. And she chose her anyway. There's something sacred about that, something unteachable. You can feel it in the way she carries herself. Not loud, not defensive, but quietly radiant.
She has become the calm she used to beg others for. The world keeps asking her, "Don't you want someone?" And she smiles. "Of course I do, but I don't need someone. There's a difference." That difference is everything. It's what separates the woman who fears solitude from the one who flourishes in it. Because once you find peace in your own company, every relationship after that becomes a choice, not a crutch. So here's the paradox. The woman who doesn't need love is the one most ready to receive it. Not the version built on dependency, but the kind rooted in awareness. She attracts from fullness, not emptiness. She gives without losing herself. She loves without forgetting her boundaries. And when the right person finally appears, they won't complete her. They'll complement her, because she's already complete. This is what self-empowerment truly means. It's not about rejecting connection. It's about remembering that connection is sacred, and only those who honor it deserve access to it. So, to every woman listening to this, if you've ever been told you're too independent, too complicated, too strong, don't dim it. Those words were never insults. They were confessions from those who couldn't match your depth. You are not hard to love. You're just not easy to deceive. The woman who lives alone is not waiting for a fairy tale. She's writing her own mythology, one of peace, purpose, and presence. She's not behind in life. She's ahead of illusion. So if this message resonated with you, take a breath. Let the silence around you feel holy for a moment. And if you felt seen in these words, comment one word below, whole, because that's what you are, whole, enough, already home. And if this story reminded you of your own strength, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with another woman who's walking this same sacred path, learning that solitude isn't the absence of love, but the beginning of it. Like this video, comment your opinion about loneliness of women, subscribe, and let this message ripple into the hearts of every woman who needs to remember that being alone can be the most beautiful way to return to yourself.